And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Karin Wilkinson, author and contributor to L.A. Marzulli's monthly newsletter. She has been abducted by non-human alien entities possibly hundreds of times and has seen many UFOs throughout her lifetime, which we're going to talk about and more. Karin, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm just so happy to be here today with you, our fellow Texans here, having a great time talking to you earlier. Yes, I'm excited to be on the show. The book is Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest, and it's an account of my lifelong abduction experiences and a lot of other things as well, near-death experiences, things like that.
Well, at what age or at what point in your life did you start to realize that you were being abducted by ETs instead of possibly seeing, maybe a friend as a child?
Sure. I was being taken from my earliest memories. And, I have very vivid early memories of being taken from my bedroom, being, woken up, feeling a change, feeling the change in the room, feeling a change in the energy, feeling almost an evil presence, if you will, in the room. And sometimes there would be a light coming in a window. Sometimes there would be this low hum that just went from low to lower. There would be usually at least two, if not more, small gray entities in the room, non-human. And the typical grays that people often describe: bulbous heads, black screen eyes, thin, kind of brittle looking bodies. They don't smell very good. They'd have a sort of a sulfur, urine, dead animal sort of smell to them. Some very strong, some not so much, just depending. It was always different depending on the entity itself.
When you say you were taken out of your room, do you mean physically taken or just your consciousness taken out of your body?
No, I was physically removed from my home as a very small child. My earliest memories, I remember being afraid of certain types of people when I was 2 or 3 years old because they looked like these Nordic entities that I was already encountering. I have more vivid memories of being levitated off of my bed at the ages, 4, 5, 6 years old. Because when they would come in the room, then I would go into a state of panic. Sometimes I would wet the bed and feel my body just go into almost like a sleep paralysis state, only I was awake. I was wide awake because I wake up because I was scared and I knew they were coming because it happened often, so often.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Ohio.
In Ohio, okay.
And it was at our house in Central Ohio, and sometimes more often at my grandparents' farm in Southern Ohio,
All right.
down on the Ohio River. An area with a lot of high strangeness. This area is surrounded by the ancient earthworks like Serpent Mound, Sipe Mound, the Adena and Hopewell ancient earthworks. All of these are highly charged sites where, high strangeness occurs. Ancient meteor crash sites, all kinds of things around the area. As a little kid, I didn't know about any of that being high strangeness. I just knew we would stop there because there was a roadside rest and we'd play around this Serpent Mound. And or we'd climb up and down Sipe Mound, or giant mounds. For us, it was just a hill to climb up and roll down. We didn't know any better. But yeah, it would be from my home, and I would be levitated by these entities off of the bed and up towards the ceiling or over towards a window, sometimes down a hall towards a different window. And I would feel a change come over my body, like a vibration type change, where it almost felt like I was just separating into a million bazillion little pieces. It's so hard to describe because we don't have anything like that normally happens to us here. And I would go through a ceiling or through a closed window or through a screen. And I'd see all these details, like the little curls and the brown edges and the wallpaper on my ceiling at my grandma's house, or the dead bugs in the light fixtures, or Oh, well, the screens, the little squares weren't all actually squares. A lot of them were bent or broken or, sideways or what have you. Just, silly things that you just see when you're right in it and your brain is just feeling scrambled. It's like my friend Ellie Marzulli calls it UFO brain fog.
Hmm.
Um, and from that point, often I would be switched into like a sleep state. And the next thing I know, I would wake up, sometimes on a exam table with various types of entities around me. These different types of grays. They were not like the little ones that would be in my bedroom. They were taller. They had more facial expressions. Their faces looked more wrinkly, almost older, but not. I have no way of knowing that if they were. They were taller. They were more robust. Some were bigger. Some were medium. Just different sizes. They had different facial expressions. Their eyes moved, unlike the small grays. They were usually the ones doing the examination, although there were smaller grades were around doing things as well, helping. Um, and I don't know what they were doing. They didn't ever stop and tell me, like a nice doctor would, hey, now we're going to examine this. No, it was machines I didn't understand. Some that pulled down over me like a big x-ray machine, or that were beside me, needles in my neck or my chest or my, different parts of my body, just examining all different parts of me. And I don't know what they were doing or why. They never told me. But that happened all throughout my lifetime.
Is it still happening today?
No, no, I learned how to stop it.
When did it stop?
Yeah, it stopped. It stopped a couple of years ago. It was after I had my near-death experience, and I renewed my faith, and I remembered a lot of things that I had kind of forgotten. And I remembered that whoever these beings were, they had the same creator that I did, and that there was an authority greater than theirs and greater than mine that I could call on.
Hmm.
And I learned that I could call on my creator, on God, on Jesus, and they had to stop. And I remembered that in my heart. And I remembered that in my mind. And when I was able to do that, they stopped. They can't cross the threshold of my home anymore. They'll be outside the window or they'll still try to get to me, but they can't take me anymore. And it's amazing. I've talked to so many other abductees with the same experience where they've been able to stop it the exact same way and live a happier, more peaceful life. Um, and that's one of the reasons I wrote this book, because I
Mhm.
want to share. I want it to be okay for people to talk about this, because as abductees, we're kind of treated as if we're crazy,
Mhm.
we're delusional. Maybe we don't, these are just dreams or something like that. These aren't dreams. I have a lifetime of these memories. These memories come with physical scars and ailments and lost pregnancies and unexplained time loss and so many other things that I write about in the book. And not just for me, but for so many others. And we have these memories. I didn't go through regression therapy or anything like that. I just always remembered. And it's not just me, people are like, well, what makes you special that you remember? I'm like, nothing. There are so many of us who remember. I'm nothing special. I'm just talking about it, trying to raise awareness about it, trying to share and trying to, let people know that they're not alone, because it's a very lonely place to be, because you do spend your life just pretending it didn't happen, because no one wants to hear about it. It's too strange, too out there, too crazy, it's a difficult place. It's a difficult way to live.
Can you tell us about your near-death experience?
Oh, absolutely. So I was going in for one of the many surgeries I've had on my back, and it wasn't my first surgery with this doctor. I was very comfortable with the surgeon, and they wheeled me into the operating room, and I had two IV ports in, but I did not have an IV hooked up to me. I wasn't hooked up to any machines yet. I just got wheeled in and transferred onto the operating table, and they weren't ready for me yet. So there was two nurses in the room, and I just, was just hanging out there, laying on the table waiting. And the anesthesiologist and an anesthesiologist, a woman came into the room, leaned over me. She had a white lab coat and her pocket was full of syringes. And she pulled one of the syringes out and pushed it into my IV port. I thought it was a sedative to relax me because you get that right before surgery. And I'm like, oh, this is my favorite part. I'll get to go to sleep peacefully. And um, it was a paralytic. And I suddenly, my body just turned to cement. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't signal for help. I couldn't move. It was like drowning. But I, I just died. I was dying. It was horrible. I was suffocating. There was no one watching me. And I wasn't hooked up to any machines, so there's no monitors to say, hey, she's not breathing. It was terrifying. And because of that, afterwards I ended up doing some PTSD therapy, which is why I was able to do what I'm doing now. But to back up, so as I'm dying, I'm like, oh God, help me. And I hear an audible voice in my head say, it's okay, you can let go now. And just in the blink of an eye, I am out of my body and watching everything. I can see through walls. Walls still exist, but they don't stop me from seeing what's on the other side. I can hear everything. I can see everything. I'm still me. I still have this personality. I'm still me. That's what struck me the most. It was crazy. And I felt the most immeasurable, intense love and peace that I have ever felt in my life. We don't have anything like it here. There are no words to describe it. It's like being wrapped in the warmest, coziest blanket and just I I wish I could have that feeling every day because it was the most incredible feeling. Um and I knew instinctively that I was just to stay there close to my body, and I just watched everything going on. Time didn't exist for me the way it does here. Um I still was me. I still had my personality. I wasn't worried about anything. I wasn't worried about dying or whether I'd come back. I didn't think about anything like that. There was just no worry, no fear. I watched the nurses, one of the nurses walk over. She walked past me and realized I didn't look right. And she said to the other nurse, oh no, is she having an allergic reaction? And the other nurse looks and is like, oh my God, she's not breathing. And she starts to panic. So the other nurse runs into the adjoining room and tells the surgeon. He comes running out yelling, bag her, bag her. And they put one of those bags on my face and they can't get me breathing. And they start calling more people into the room, coding me. And um, a different anesthesiologist. I never saw that first anesthesiologist. I don't know if it was a nurse, doctor, whatever. Never saw her again. Never saw her again. But a different one comes in and he intubates me. And as soon as they get me breathing, everything goes black. And they put me under and I'm back in my body. And the next thing I remember, I'm waking up in the recovery room, which for me isn't having had many surgeries. Normally, I would wake up in the recovery room, groggy with, and one nurse looking after a couple of people, giving me ice chips. This time I had just so wires and wires and wires coming off of me, um, hooked up to so many different machines. There was like 6 doctors and nurses standing around me. And when they brought me out, I was in so much pain. I was just screaming in pain, which is something I've never done. Um, and they kept having to put me back under so that I wouldn't stroke out or have a heart attack or whatever. They did that for about 4 hours. And at that point, I remember bringing me out and starting to just scream in pain and thinking, God, help me. Why did you put me back in this body if I'm just gonna go through this? Why don't I just go back? And all of a sudden, there were 2 orderlies standing at the foot of the bed, and I noticed them right away. And they touched my leg, and they just were comforting me. And all of a sudden, I didn't care about the pain. And they smiled at me, and I looked at them. I said, they were just young men dressed in scrubs. And I said, oh, you look like you could be 2 of my boys. I have a lot of kids. Some call me mom. They're not even my kids, but I, take in anyone who walks by, kids and animals. And I looked at them, I said, oh, you look like you could be 2 of my boys, because they were about the age of some of my sons. And they comforted me and helped me through recovery. And so about 20, 30 minutes later, they were with me I had a nurse and an orderly, and those two were with me at the foot of the bed, up all the way up the elevator and down the hall to the ICU room. And we get to the room, and my husband and my daughter-in-law are there waiting for me. I grabbed their hands. I said, "You have to meet the boys. I don't think I would have gotten out of recovery without them. They're so sweet." And they're like, "Okay, where are they?" And they're right here at the foot of the bed. And there was no one there. And I asked the nurse and the other orderly what happened to the boys. And she's like, "Honey, what boys are you talking about?" I'm like, "The boys that have been with me this whole time. I was talking to them in the elevator. I was talking to them in the hallway." She's like, "Honey, it's just the two of us. We wondered who you were talking to. Nobody else saw them, just me, just me." And I think they were angels. I think it was an angelic encounter with very benevolent, good, kind, loving angels that God sent to help me through that really, really difficult and time.
Who do you think was the voice that said, "It's okay"?
It was interesting because it wasn't my voice. When you think in your head, you kind of know what that voice in your head sounds like. It was an audible, separate voice, and it was like love in a voice. It's so hard to describe. It was a voice that I knew, a voice that I trusted. It was God. It was my creator, because he was completely in control and completely with me. There was no um, question and no doubt. It was just instantaneous, and it was love, and it was peace. Um, and I knew, I just knew that it was my creator. It was God. It was Jesus. It was the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to, call it, there for me.
Were you religious before this NDE?
I had been um, born again way, way back when I was in my late teens, around 18, 19 years old. So it had been years before. I always believed in God. I always knew God was there. I even prayed. I wouldn't say I'm religious now, but what I did was I forgot that I had a creator who loved me so much, that he was always there for me and always protecting me and watching out for me, even when I wasn't being grateful or aware of him. So it was kind of a spiritual amnesia for years. I just forgot. I forgot how much God loved me. Um, and that reminded me, because there was no doubt in my mind. You can't feel that kind of love and that intense love and peace that just surpasses anything we have, anything we can imagine, and not know how much we're loved, you know?
How did you process your NDE in a way that you came to the realization that God is also the God of ETs and you were able to get them to stop?
Well, because I knew my Bible a little bit, and that really took me back down a path after that, of going through some PTSD therapy to deal with how the NDE happened. And that led me to dealing with helping me to deal with this lifetime of memories that I was just trying to pretend didn't exist, or just blocking, not really blocking out, that's the wrong word, but not dealing with, and that were causing issues in my life. And I knew from my Bible that, we weren't the only beings in the Bible, that the Bible is, as my friend L.A. Marzulli calls it, the guidebook to the supernatural. And it is full of stories of entities that come down in ships and beams of light, that walk through walls, that go in and out of different dimensions, that can take on corporeal forms and have a meal with someone and then go off into the ether into a different form. Can change their form and travel in these, light ships, and travel in pillars of light and different things like that. So I understood that there were these B'nai Elohim, these sons of God, these beings that he created before us. Some people call them angels, is another word for them. It's angel is really a specific term, but for a type of being, but it fits. Um, and so I knew that they existed, and God just put those pieces together for me in my head, and it just made sense. And I realized they had the same creator, whatever, whenever they were created, whoever they were, had the same creator as me. And if you ask them, they know it too. And when it confronted them with my knowledge of that and that they couldn't harm me anymore, they also were aware of that. And they had to back off, and they had to acknowledge that. Um, the spiritual realm comes with a lot of, in God's universe and what have you, it comes with a lot of rules and regulations, things that have to be followed. You think about like vampires and things like that, where threshold covenants, you have to agree, you have to allow things in, you have to open doors. People talk all the time about, I opened the door, I opened a portal, I opened you know, myself up to this. And is how it works. And you have to close those things down as well. Um, and someone else can get permission for something to happen.
In your book, you write about that non-human alien entities are intervening with humans to corrupt the bloodlines. Can you
Yeah,
tell us more about that?
sure. Yeah, I was part of, as crazy as it sounds, a breeding program, and not just me, but many other people I've spoken with since. Um, and I was taken for my eggs. Men, friends of mine, have recounted stories where they've been taken for their sperm. And I was implanted with a fetus of a hybrid entity, and it was taken out of me at around the 3-month period of time. So, how I figured out what was happening is I was married. So, for me to get pregnant was not an unusual, wasn't something that wasn't possible. Okay. So, I got pregnant. I was very happy about it the first time it happened. And at about the 3-month mark, I woke up in the middle of the night and I just was in terrible pain. I was spotting a little bit, but I didn't lose anything. Nothing came out of me. I didn't have a miscarriage at home or anything. Went to the hospital, and this is some years ago, so all the hospitals and the doctors weren't like connected up necessarily. And they verified that I had been pregnant. Went in, they couldn't find a heartbeat. Did an ultrasound, couldn't find a baby. Did a DNC, there was no fetal tissue, nothing. My uterus was clean. Um, they couldn't explain it. Nobody could figure out where the baby went. They're like, "Are you sure you didn't lose this baby at home?" I'm like, no,
Hmm.
I would know if I lost anything at home. And the only thing I had done is spotted a little bit, and they had everything was with me. So, nothing. And this happened many times.
And they verified that you were pregnant, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. To the point that other times when I went in when this was happening, because they do a blood test, they know you're pregnant because that pregnancy hormone is still in your blood. They went and looked in my fallopian tubes because I thought, well, maybe the baby's up in there because, there's a thing called a tubal pregnancy, which is very dangerous
Mhm.
because it can rupture your fallopian tubes. So, yeah, I mean, they're baffled, I mean, yeah, and some people say, oh, your body absorbed that baby or, different things. I'm sorry, I was pregnant. I was physically pregnant, and people can say what they want, but I did later then see, one of these infants and held one of them.
Really?
Um,
Where did you see that?
so I was taken and taken to a facility. I was generally when I would be taken, it was to these underground facilities. I knew they were underground because we get in these elevators that just went down and down and down. And then I would get on what, especially when I was little, I called them the sideways elevators because they were silent, but it had benches and went really fast. Now I realize that was most likely like a train, some kind of a high-speed train system or something. And on this particular time, they brought me to a section underground where it was this long hallway and everything there is very strangely lit, very darkly lit, like with some places are like a blue backlight or red, but just darkly lit. And this particular hallway seemed to be backlit with like red lighting, and the walls were like what you would see in a pet store where they have all the aquariums with the fish, except instead of fish, in them were little fetuses. I don't know if they were human or animal or what the hell were. I couldn't identify them all, obviously, and I couldn't see them all either. And some were different sizes, but it's just lining this hallway. And then at either end of the hallway, and on either side there were doorways. So they took me to one of those doorways and opened it, and it was the size of a big closet, big enough for, many people, several people to be in. There was a woman in there imitating the act of childbirth, which I found very weird and freaky. And they took me in that same room, and there was a taller gray. It kind of had looked female to me. It seemed to have feminine features, and a Nordic entity, which are the ones that, if people are familiar with that, they look almost human. But they have really big eyes, like twice the size of ours, very fair, tall, thin, almost whitish skin. Um, and they handed me this little infant, tiny, and it was like a purplish red color, and it had a really, really big head, and really big eyes. And they told me that it was my baby and that it was a good baby, and then I needed to hold the baby. So I held it up to me like I would my own babies, but it didn't cuddle into me. It didn't respond to me. And I was just like, what's wrong with this baby? I was getting really upset because if this was my baby, I wanted to love it. I wanted to take it home. I wanted to fix it if there was something wrong with it, and it wouldn't love on me. It wouldn't cuddle into me. And I get really upset by that. And they could see how upset I was getting. And so they came to take it away from me. And that made me even more upset because I'm like, no, I'm going to take this baby home. But I wanted to get out of there, but I also wanted to take it with me because it was mine. And um, they just shut me off. They have this ability to just put you into a sleep state, like, immediately. And the next thing I know, I woke up in my room. I was so upset because I wanted that baby. And ever since that, I knew that if that baby was still alive and if I had others, I wanted them. I wanted to see them. I wanted to hold them. I wanted to meet them. I wanted to take care of them. If they were half me, then I thought, they would be half good and half human, and not there would be something there for me to love, to raise, to take care of.
I've had two guests recently say that there are a lot of human ET hybrids underground that they're waiting to repopulate the earth with. Is that what they're doing? Or what do you mean by corrupting the bloodlines?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So as humans, we have, as author and researcher Timothy Alberino says, we have the birthright to this planet. He has a book called Birthright that talks extensively about that. And these entities want that birthright to Earth, but God gave us that when He put Adam and Eve here on, or His creation, and on the Earth. And if they are able to infiltrate the human bloodline, then they can also gain access to the title deed to this planet and to the people. And if they can do it in such a way as to not be noticed, like these hybrids look human enough that they can just get away with having them, as Dr. David Jacobs says in his book, Walking Among Us, which I have the book, have not been able to read it because it was way too triggering for me, because it is about abductees and their experiences. But I want to read it. I just can't. But I've been told about it. I read the dust jacket. But anyways, he says, well, if they are, walking among us, which he believes they are, then they can be used to deceive people too. They can be used to not just gain the title deed to this earth. There's enough of them, but to deceive people away from the truth about who we are, who our creator is, and things like that. The late Dr. Chuck Missler used to say that Satan's outnumbered 2 to 1, and he's building an army. And that makes sense, because if these entities are indeed what the ancient texts tell us, and the guidebook to the supernatural, i.e., our Bible, tells us, if these are fallen angels, then they are outnumbered, and they do need to build up their army to have enough to get whatever it is they want, whether it's this earth itself, whether it's to lead people away because they want to lead people astray from the truth of God and their creator, or what have you. So I do agree, there are a lot of potentially hybrids already walking among us or under the earth waiting to be able to come out. If they don't look enough like us, I don't think they can just show up. That would have to be done with some sort of program, for lack of a better word, because people wouldn't really accept that.
Do you view Satan as a being that's equal to God but evil? Or do you see Satan as just a really bad ET? And if not, what is your definition?
Sure. Well, Satan, or the Nakash, as he appeared in the Garden of Eden, was created by God. So he's not equal to God, but he's one of God's many creations, just like all of the angelic beings. And he was the most beautiful of all the creations. They said when he walked, the music just happened. He was supposed to be amazing. And he rebelled against God and wanted to be like God and wanted to be equal to God, but he's not. And he's not the creator. He has a creator. So that's where I view Satan, as he is not equal to God. If you talk to someone who is a Satanist or a fallen entity, they know the Bible better than most Christians ever will, because they know that it contains so much helpful information, not just for us, but for them too.
All right, let's fast forward then to when you met your child later in life.
Okay, sure. Oh, and I'm sorry, I don't think I answered the second half of your question, but I do believe that these entities that I have encountered, the negative ones, now remember I told about a positive experience I had, are fallen. They're just entities that have fallen away from God. The children that I encountered was only a couple of years ago, probably about 5 years ago. It was after my NDE. I really wanted, like I said before, to see my children. If they were still alive, I wanted to have a relationship with them. I'm a mom. I love my kids. I would do anything for my children. I would step in front of a bullet or a speeding train for them. And so I really prayed that I could see these children, that I could meet them, that I could help them if it was possible. And I woke up one night and three of my kids were standing by the bed. And I thought it was three of my current children. I immediately said one of their names out loud. Hey, so and so, what's wrong? And I then realized these weren't my boys, that my current boys that lived at home that were adults. These were different. And I hit my husband. I'm like, hey, wake up. Look at this. What's going on? And I could not rouse him. I could not wake him up. And he wakes up if I just nudge him a little bit, nothing. I could not get him to wake up. So I turned back to them. I'm like, I was very excited, and very happy that they were there. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's you. I could tell they were my kids. I could see resemblance. I could tell they were mine. I could feel it. I know my kids. I can pick my kids out of a crowd. The ones that are in the military, even the adopted ones, I can pick them out of a crowd and lock eyes and feel that love. These kids, I could tell they were mine. They were dressed in hood type hoodies, dark gray, and they seemed really dark. Their eyes were really dark, and it was really dark. The room was really dark, so it was hard to focus on them clearly. Their skin seemed almost a purplish color. Again, really strange. I couldn't see their hair color, but I could see their faces, and they looked like they were mine. I was very excited, reached out to them, and I just all of a sudden felt this sense of dread and evil come off of them, and it hit me like a wall of water. And I'm like, what? What's wrong? I'm like, why are you coming at me like that? Because I just wanted to love them. And they just said, you have to come with us. And it was the mind speak, not the verbal speak. And I'm like, no. I looked at the person, I said, honey, what's wrong? I can't come with you. I'm not going to come with you. And they just kept repeating, come with us. You have to come with us. Come with us. And I just kept saying no. And they got angrier. And I could just feel the anger just bubbling up. They wanted me to come with them. And they're, getting, you can tell, just physically agitated. And finally, I'm like, just habitually, I'm like, in Jesus' name, no, I'm not going with you. And As soon as I said that, they were gone. And in that same second that they just disappeared, my husband sat straight up in bed and he's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Now you sit up, now you wake up, you missed it. They were just here." And I was so sad because it's not what I wanted. I wanted to love on them and they didn't want to love me back. And it was really clear. And that was a painful experience.
What does your husband think about all your contact?
Well, I didn't tell him initially when we first met, but once I did, he believes me and he he said it makes sense based on everything that, the way I am and the way I am about things. Like I can't look out a window at night without being scared. I had to draw the curtains, draw the blinds and close the curtains. Not so much now, but it was always that way. I have all these irrational fears and I have all these things about me that then suddenly made so much more sense to him. And strange things that had happened that he couldn't make sense of, but where he would, have the sleep paralysis or something come over him and think he was seeing me leave or just things like that that didn't make sense to him because he didn't have all the pieces. So he believes it and he understands it and he's seen the physical scars and he's seen the physical issues I've had because of it and the unexplained anomalous things that have happened to me because of it. And he gets it. He gets it.
Is there any way that the aliens could have been helping you all along in your life and you're misinterpreting their actions?
That's a good question. I cannot find a way to put the stamp of hopeful, benevolent alien space brother on entities that kidnap little against their will. I've talked to so many other people. We're taken when we're little kids and we don't want to be taken and we're tortured, physically tortured. Then as a young adult, I was raped against my will. I had babies taken from me without my permission. I did not agree to those things. None of those things were helpful to me. And when I compare that to the amazing, beautiful experience I had with those two beings in the hospital who just helped me and loved me and did what needed to be done, and then they left and they didn't take anything, they didn't ask for anything, they didn't do anything against my will, it's night and day. So I cannot justify kidnapping little children. I just can't. Not let alone the rest of it.
Do you think there are any benevolent ETs out there?
Sure, the ones that came to help me in the hospital, those were extraterrestrials. Those were not Earth people, and they were very benevolent. So absolutely, I do.
Hmm.
God has good angels out there, and then there are bad ones. The problem is when people go calling on these things because they want to see them, they want to meet them, they want to have relationships with them. You don't know what you're going to get because it's the typical good and evil scenario, right? A bad guy on the street who wants to rob you at gunpoint or carjack you isn't going to walk up to you with a sign that says that's what he's going to do, or she. The bad person is going to approach you so as to trick you and then take what they want and do the bad thing that they're going to do or commit the crime. These entities are so much stronger than we are. They're so much more advanced. They manipulate space, time, energy, and matter in ways that we can not even conceive of. They have strengths and abilities so far beyond us, and they are not created for our Earth and our space, but for a much wider space and many more dimensions. And they are not something to be trifled with because we're not prepared to deal with that. We don't have the skill sets to defend ourselves. And we don't know if we're going to get a good one or a bad one if we call on one. And that's where the danger of it is. And that's where we need a protection from our creator.
So, in your opinion, their agenda is to take over the planet, but they can't because they've kind of got to do it a backhanded way or become us in a way so they can.
Exactly. There are there are rules and legalities created in this universe, and they have to follow those rules, and they have to stay within the confines of what is dictated. And yes, I absolutely agree with you.
Do you have any other memories of being on the craft and what it looks like inside?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there are different kinds. Um, One of them, which was like a transport craft, which would pick me up, and I have more memories of this one as I was older, like late teens, early 20s, and so on. This craft would pick, I would end up on this craft, and there would be lots of other people. It was like a bigger craft with all of these um, bench type seats, and the seats kind of had like indentations where the people would sit in them, and they kind of formed to your body when you sat in it. It like moved a little bit, and there would be lots of people in there, and I was very familiar with being on it, and was very much at that point kind of in a Stockholm syndrome kind of relationship with the person I refer to as my handler, because I had the same entity with me all throughout my life. And I write a great deal about that in the book. So, but these ships were alive, for lack of a better way of describing it. If I moved towards the edge where like the windows were, the window would get bigger and the edge would get bigger to accommodate me. Or maybe I was getting smaller. I don't know. I mean, it's so weird. But they move around you. It's so hard to describe, but you could tell the ship was alive, whether it was made with some sort of organic material, an AI. I don't know, because we don't have that right now, but it was like a living robot almost. And on them, one of the things that's I remember the most about the ships was if you got unruly. Like sometimes people would wake up because you're kind of in this UFO brain fog, and in this kind of sleepish state. If anyone got unruly, and this is something I don't, you don't do this often because it was very uncomfortable. They had this thing, it's like a blanket, and they put it over you, and it shrinks onto your body and immobilizes you, and you can't move, you can't yell, you can't do anything. And it's like a straight jacket, for lack of a better word, but it's different. And I never wanted that blanket on me. It was the worst feeling. I don't like to be confined. And I think that's part of the reason for it. Like once that happens, you're just like, ugh. Um, yeah, not at all. But so, I describe some of the ship memories in the book too. I don't have any ship memories of like them landing in the yard kind of thing. Those are the kind of ship memories I don't have. I don't ever have anything like that happen that I remember happening. Maybe I suppressed it, but I don't have anything like that.
Why do you think God lets them do all this stuff?
That's a good question. Well, we live in a fallen world. We live in a world where um, they were Adam and Eve were tempted by the Nakash, by the Satan, gave into that temptation, and just as these entities have free will, then we were given that free will. And there are people who give him permission for these entities to take people. So it's not just happening willy-nilly. When you look at things like the Eisenhower Agreement or the Granada Treaty, some people call it the Eisenhower Agreement, some people call it the Granada Treaty, the Majestic 12, groups like that. Permission was given for humans and animals to be taken and experimented on. We live in a world that, like I said before, is very transactional and has a lot of rules, and those rules are followed, and God loves us enough to let us make our own choices and decide if we want to love him back. And, you don't want a spouse who's going to force you to love them. You want a spouse who you love, you know? I mean, and I think it's the same with anyone and anything. And that's no different.
You mentioned that you had this being that was with you for many, many years. He was kind of like your handler or something?
Yes. Yes, I had this one specific person being who was with me from the time I was from as early as I can remember. I don't really remember many times where he wasn't there. I mean, sometimes he wasn't there, but generally he was there. He appeared as a man, very tall, very square jawed, very military, buzz cut kind of looking, just typical kind of, like I said, I would describe him as a soldier type man. He didn't have a name. We had like an imprint, like a knowing. Um, that's how everything was there. Everything doesn't work the way it does with us, in our little box that we call our world. It's so much bigger. The universe is so much bigger than us. But so we had a knowing. I knew him, he knew me. And that's how the name was. The name thing was very different. So that's why I call him my handler, because I never had like a human name for him. Anyway, he was always there. He, you know, showing me where I needed to go, telling me what was going to happen next, teaching me things, telling me, today you're going to be in here, or going to be in here with these children, or they're going to come in here, you're going to have an examination or whatever. Or sit here and be quiet, or, follow the rules, or be good, or, whatever. And I got very familiar with him, very close with him over the years.
Was he human?
No, he appeared human, but then as we got closer, and I had a very Stockholm syndrome relationship with this entity, that capture bonding kind of thing, where I really felt an affection towards him. As I got older and reached maturity, our relationship became physical, and I'm not comfortable speaking about that in great detail here, but I do write about it in the book in a little more detail. But so I had a very Stockholm syndrome relationship with him. And there would be times during certain activities where I would see him, his his he would kind of like fuzz out like a TV screen changing channels almost, you know what I mean? And I realized, I'm like, are you hiding your appearance? Do you look different? Because I want to see what you look like. Because I won't be afraid of you, I promise, and so he eventually showed me his true form, and he was what you would call a reptilian. And he was beautiful. He wasn't this ugly, slimy, lizardy kind of scary things that you see pictures of online and stuff like that. I've never found anything that looks like him. There was kind of a line that went down the center of his face and down him, and they weren't like scales, but his skin was kind of like scales, but it was more like faceted and like opalescent almost, and just shimmery and shiny, beautiful. He was beautiful. It's the only way, but we don't, he's not like anything I've ever seen here. It didn't look like a lizard or a giant monitor lizard or something like that. He was very beautiful, strange, but still beautiful at the same time.
What do you think about all the recent UFO revelations in the press?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think it's interesting. I think something is going on that's forcing their hand, because I don't think that this would be shared with us unless it had to be shared for some reason. Unless there was something that was benefiting our government or the powers that be, or someone saying, you have to do this now. Maybe something's been leaked that they didn't have control over. Because when I was being taken, from the time I was very little until the very last time I remember being there were humans working alongside these alien non-human entities, humans and aliens working together. And they utilized me and other people like me that I had to watch to show them what would happen to their family, their friends, their loved ones, their daughters, their wives, if they talked about what they were doing. These people were threatened to be quiet. I think some of them actually lived there. And if you think about it, I kind of frame it this way. If you get this great job in an aerospace company or for the government, and you get this super top secret clearance, and they're like, you're so smart, we're going to give you this special top secret job, and you have to sign this NDA, and now you get to go into this, new job. I don't think these people knew what they were signing up for until it was too late. and then they couldn't talk about it. And I used to have a lot of anger towards the people that didn't help me, but I was not allowed to talk to them, and they were not allowed to talk to me. And that was made very clear to me. And I was threatened, and so were they.
Do you think at some point the ETs will betray those humans, and at that point it'll be too late and they'll realize that they made a big mistake?
Yeah, if it hasn't already happened, I'm sure that will be the outcome, because they have no reason and no need for us once they get what they want. We are in the way. If you think about it, what we know from history is that these entities occupied this earth long before we were here. And because of the falling away and because of that war, and this is in our ancient texts and things, and there are other people who are much better experts on this than I, that I can steer you towards. But when that happened, the earth was destroyed and God rebuilt the earth for us, for humans. And then he went and made man out of the dirt, and that was a big, to the fallen. And then he gave us the birthright to the planet that they loved. The other angels, it says in the Bible, shouted and sang for joy when he rebuilt the earth, and they were so happy that it was back. But the fallen ones are pissed because he did rebuild it, and then he went and gave it to the dirt man, you know. So when they're done with us, they're not with the people that are working with them, they're not going to have any use for those people. I'm sure they'll keep them around as long as they have usefulness, but beyond that, they're way too powerful to worry about us little humans.
I think one of my guests one time stated that we may eventually become their pets.
That would make sense. I could see that happening. I mean, they're so much more powerful than we are, and stronger and smarter. It's the difference between, look at what we do with primates, you know, and I think the gap between us and a primate is not as large as the gap between us and these entities. So there's they are operating in realms and in areas that we can't get to. We're right here on Earth in our dimension, in our realm, with our abilities. They're operating outside of our space and time and our realm and our understanding. Their power is beyond what we can imagine. And if people think that they can compete with that, they're wrong. Obviously, our nuclear weapons aren't doing anything against them. And if anything, they're going to stop those nukes from being used because they want to preserve the earth for themselves, and I think it makes sense why they show up around those nuclear sites as well.
Well, your book is called Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. What
Yes.
is the main takeaway that you want the reader to come away with?
Right. There's a couple of things. One is that this is not an unusual circumstance. This has happened to many, many, many people. You know, um, I'm sure you could turn to one of your neighbors, probably had something like this happen. If they haven't been taken, they've at least seen a UFO. It's okay I want to make it okay to talk about it and to let people know the very main thing. There is a way to stop it. You don't have to be taken against your will. You can stop it. There is a higher power, and that is there for everyone. It's not about what religion you are. It's not about what church you go to. It's not about how you're living and what you're doing. It's for everyone, because we all have the same creator. It's not about judgment. It's not about pushing my thoughts and ideas on anyone. I'm not that kind of person. I don't expect everyone to believe the way I do. That's fine. We all get to have our free will. So the biggest takeaway is that you can stop it. You don't have to go through anything special and go to some special church or school or something else to make that happen. That it's okay. You can stop it.
Well, after watching this podcast, other abductees or people in general may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. You can reach out to me on social media. I answer questions through that. My social media on Facebook is my name, Karin Wilkinson, Karin. Wilkinson, Wilkinson. And on Instagram, it's Karin Wilkinson Author. My website is KarinWilkinsonAuthor.com with eyes, and I think you have all that for the show notes. And then the book is available exclusively at lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net. That is the only place you'll find it unless you're finding me in person, which I do have events. But I want to back up a minute. I did forget to say something. On my website, there is a page where you can also reach out to me there, and that goes straight to my email, and then I can email you back, and we can be in touch that way too. And I do get back to everyone. If you want to just share your story, if you want me to get back to you, if you have questions, what have you, I do get back to everyone. Sometimes it takes a little time, so be patient with me if you don't hear from me right away. I get a lot of people reaching out to me from all these different forms of communication. So I try to make sure I get back to everyone at least in some form to let you know, hey, I got your message, and yes, let's find a time. But it is important to me that people know they're not alone, and you can share your story. You share what's happened to you. You're not alone, and you don't have to be afraid to share what's happened. It's okay. It really is okay.
Do you have anything else that you're working on that you want people to know about?
Well, I am starting to work on kind of the next project, which is more based around not just what I have experienced, but what others have experienced, and some of the similarities and the things that draw us together. So I'll let y'all know when that gets closer. So that's just in its infantile stages. But right now, this year is going to be because this book just came out in October. It will be a lot of going to a lot of conferences and speaking engagements and things like that. If you follow LA Marzulli at lamarzulli.net and you go to his schedule, chances are I'm going to be at most of those same, not all of them, but some of those same conferences he'll be at. And I will have those listed on my website as well. Sometimes it doesn't get updated as often as I want, but yeah, so there will be, I also put all that on my social media. And everything. Like this weekend, I don't know when this is coming out. So, but the last weekend of January 2024, I'll be in Lubbock, Texas. The end of February, I'll be in Orlando, Florida. So about once a month, I end up somewhere, meeting people, talking to people. That's my favorite part, is we can sit down and just talk and share our stories. And there is comfort in knowing that you're not alone. And for me, that's a great comfort.
Before we wrap it up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Absolutely. We're not alone. And this isn't the typical we're not alone in the universe, but we're not alone. We have each other. We have each other. So no matter what happens, just remember, no matter how dark it seems, you're not alone. You have other people who've had these experiences too, and we can lean on each other, and we can be here for each other, and just love each other and be good to one another. No judgment, just love.
Karin, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Well, thank you so much. I've had the best time being here with you. Thank you for listening and for providing this wonderful platform for others. The work you're doing is wonderful and amazing. So thank you for everything you're doing too.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.